Welcome all. In today's class, we'll be looking at Toni Morrison's text, Beloved. And this text is a multifaceted one, and it is a text that resists easy classification, and it is always difficult to teach because of the employment of the magic realist mode of fiction. So, the narrative technique of Beloved is really unique, and also the use of the plot structure. So, before going into the text of Beloved, a bit of info about the works of Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison's given name was Cole Anthony Wooford, and she's known to us as Toni Morrison. One second. And Beloved is the first part of what Morrison considers a trilogy along with Jazz and Paradise. So these three novels of Toni Morrison, Beloved, Jazz, and Paradise, they are linked by the common theme of exploration of Afro-American history. So Beloved is also a sort of neo-slave narrative, the way it actually brings the issue of slavery, the way it brings into consideration the themes of separation, exploitation, which loom large in Afro American literature. So, the world of Toni Morrison, if you are going to kind of have a detailed discussion on it, then we can find that the black ideologies are inscribed in the novels of Toni Morrison. Morrison wrote some children's works like The Big Box, like The Book of Mean People, Remember, and Toni Morrison also wrote some non-fictions like Playing in the Dark, Racing Justice, like The Birth of a Nationhood, okay, The Source of Self-Regard, and Mouthful of Blood. And she also wrote two plays. One is entitled Desdemona, and the other is Dreaming Emmet. But Morrison is basically known to us for her novels like The Bluest Eye, The Song of Solomon, Tar Baby, Beloved, Jazz, Paradise. Okay. And the other novels like Love, Mercy, Home, God Help the Child, etc. So today we are going to discuss the text, Beloved, in great detail. But it requires more than one class. Today I'll be talking about the context of Beloved. And most of the novels of Morrison, they deal with the crisis of Afro-American identity, the marginalization that they systematically face. And this theme is depicted from her debut novel, that was The Bluest Eye. Okay, and the text Bluest Eye, which came out in 1970, that was almost a text describing in practical way the crisis that Fanon had already articulated in Black Skin, White Marks. Okay, so here in The Bluest Eye, the central theme actually revolves around this issue of marginalization or the internal kind of sort of complexity that the characters actually imbibe. Okay, so this is depicted through the journey of the protagonist, Piccola Breedlove. Okay, and after that, in the next novel, that was Sula, which was actually a novel that fetched the National Book Award. So this text deals with also the maternal voices, which is also at work in Beloved. In Beloved, you see also the mother-daughter relationship that is that is depicted in great detail, especially the ending scene or the last few chapters of Beloved. In other works, for example, the text Tar Baby, which came out in 1982, that deals with the sugar plantation system in the Caribbean island. Okay, and also the marginalization of the black identity. So this text, which came out in 1987 and nominated for the National Book Critics Circle, as I told you, that it is a kind of new slave narrative, and that brings into the focus the problems of the black identity. For example, this has a long lineage. The Afro-American movement has got a long history, has got a long saga. Okay, and you can think of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay, which set the platform for such activities later on by foregrounding the black identity, black kind of problems of marginalization. And what actually characterizes Beloved as one of the most important novels of Beloved, of Morrison, is the use of the flashback scene. Okay, so sometimes you see the time alterations, sometimes the flashbacks which recur forth, by which the tangled history of different time span is brought into focus. First of all, there is a true inspiration for this work of art. And it is said that Beloved is inspired by the true story of Margaret Garner. So it has its genesis in a real life incident involving a former enslaved woman named Margaret Garner. And this woman escaped from Kentucky to Ohio, a free state, in 1856. And this real incident of Margaret Garner's story has been given a fictional form in Beloved with the addition of some ray of fancy. Okay, so when Margaret Garner was on the verge of being recaptured, Garner killed her 2-year-old daughter to spare her the horrors of slavery. So the story of taking the life of own children, that actually deeply shocked Morrison, who saw in that event, who saw in that act a heartbreaking testament to the desperation and trauma endured by those who were enslaved. So Morrison actually based this incident of Margaret Garner as a backdrop. Okay, because upon the incident and life of Margaret Garner that the entire Beloved is actually based, where the protagonist Sethe, who killed her own daughter to save her from slavery. But it is not a mere realistic novel. Okay, so Morrison has added a supernatural twist. So Sethe's home is haunted by the ghost of the dead child, who returns in a human form as a young woman named Beloved. So, this introduction of this Gothic trope lends a unique touch to the novel, and through this story, Morrison explores the themes of memory, the themes of trauma, and the enduring impact of slavery, giving voice to the painful part of American history that had long been silenced. Okay, so that is the source of Beloved, and there are some social context that you need to know because the entire novel is deeply entrenched in some specific social context, that is the post Civil War United States, particularly focusing on the Afro American experience. And this novel delves into the trauma and the brutality of the slavery era and its aftermath. Okay, so the theme of slavery that almost forms an important core of this novel, Beloved, is important one. And here, as you can see on the screen, that the fugitive laws of 1793. So, actually, such laws were very harsh in nature. Okay, and you know about the American Civil War. After that, the slaves were freed. Okay, but when such laws were in operation, the fugitive laws of 1793, such harsh laws basically actually pontificated that one cannot escape such kind of system. And if one tries to actually leave or escape, then it is actually prohibited. And there were some hunters. Okay. So even after that, there were another fugitive slave law that came out in 1850. Okay. So which actually prevented slaves from actually flying or from actually living. So here, the main protagonist of this novel, Sethe, also escapes slavery, running to Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay, so that aspect or that social context is being used or graphically inserted into the schema of things. So here, perhaps Morrison is trying to give us, in Williams's terms, in Raymond Williams's terms, the structure of feeling. Okay, the kind of lived experience of the people, which sometimes stand in contrast to the dominant mode or the dominant ideology. Okay, so the version that Morrison foregrounds here through the employment of the magic realist mode, the use of flashback, and some other innovative usage. If you read this text, you can understand, because it doesn't tell you a very linear, conventional story. Okay. It is almost like a kind of stream of consciousness narration that operates. And the plot line is very complicated to follow. Okay. It is divided into three parts, and each part begins with a description of the house. Okay. That you can see later. So I was talking about this context of slavery and also the type of marginalization that was prevalent at the time. So in that text, real history has been conflated with some fictional counterparts. Much before Toni Morrison, many writers have enriched the canon of Afro-American writings. Mention can be made of Phyllis Wheatley. You can think of the slave narratives such as Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, you can think of the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, which was entitled The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Okay, which came out much earlier, 1845. And in the post-slavery era, mention must be made of that famous movement entitled the Harlem Renaissance, which lasted from 1920 to 1940 and which was based on an Afro-American community in Harlem, which was located in the New York district. And one of the forerunners of Harlem Renaissance was Langston Hughes. Okay, so some of the text of Hughes you have read, The Negro Speaks of River, and in the history of Afro-American literature who have enriched the canon, mention may be made of Hearthstone or Zora Neale Hurston. Okay, and after that you can think of Ralph Ellison. Ralph Ellison, who is known for his famous book, Invisible Man. You know that there was earlier a novel entitled Invisible Man, which was written by H.G. Wells, a science fiction novel. But here, the Invisible Man doesn't deal with that sci-fi theme, because the Invisible Man basically deals with the issues of Black identity. Here, the man or the Black protagonist is invisible because people refuse to see him. Okay. Canon. Okay. One person I have forgotten, that is James Baldwin. Okay. James Baldwin is famous for the novel Go Tell It on the Mountain. Okay. So that also brings out this theme of Black identity in great detail. Now, coming back to the context of Beloved. Beloved, you know, that can be approached through a variety of angles. You can look at this text through the lens of feminism. You can look at this text from the lens of magic realism. You can look at this text from the prism of the slave narrative. Okay. You can also look at this text from the angle of the Gothic fiction. So there may be different kind of approaches and all are equally valid. Okay, because I'm not saying that these aspects are not there actually, but they have been assimilated in such an organic manner, in such a beautiful manner that it is very difficult to separate them out. Okay, the way that such plots, such ideas are actually dovetailed into the oeuvre of Morrison. But the central issue that obviously strikes us through this text is the theme of racism, is the theme of that systematic oppression that actually haunted them. So it is a kind of tribute to that struggle, to that resilience that they actually had shown. And each part of Beloved starts with the mention of the house number 124. Okay. And the first part of Beloved starts with 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. I have inserted here. That is the first sentence of this novel. That 124 was spiteful, full of baby's venom. And second part is 124 was loud, third is 124 was quiet. So obviously she had some intention. So when the first lines of this text that deal with the mention of that house number is a crucial one, and it also sets the mood and atmosphere for the entire novel, because here 124 refers to the address of the house where Sethe, the novel's protagonist, and her family live, and the spiteful nature of the house and its venom that refers to the malevolent spirit that haunts 124, believed by the characters to be the ghost of Sethe's deceased baby daughter. And the use of the word venom is important or powerful because it suggests a kind of active poisonous hatred. It's a striking way to characterize the spirit of a baby, typically associated with innocence. And this sentence introduces one of the novel's main themes, that is, the haunting of the present by the past. So the return of the repressed in Freudian terms. And the ghost is actually a manifestation of the horrific trauma of slavery that Sethe and her family have endured, a past they can't escape. And it also reflects the personal guilt and sorrow that Sethe feels over the desperate act she committed to try to save her children from a life of slavery. And in this way, Morrison also uses the opening line to immediately introduce readers to a world where the natural and the supernatural is blurred, where the horrors of the past have a palpable, has a kind of living presence in the present. And it is a world where even a home traditionally associated with safety, comfort, can be filled with venom and spite. So the first sentence is really important one that sets up the mood, just as the opening part of Bronte's Wuthering Heights sets up the supernatural mood and atmosphere of the entire novel, when that visit to Wuthering Heights was followed by that dream where Catherine Earnshaw tries to break into the house that Lockwood actually dreamt of. So that sets up the supernatural touch. Okay, but even here, just as you have seen in Bronte's novel, Wuthering Heights, the supernatural is not the central kind of trope. It is a backdrop. This device has been used, the device of the supernatural. But actually, Morrison is trying to aware us about such atrocities. Okay, so coming back to that social context that I was talking about. Yeah, so as I talked about that, it is set during the Reconstruction era in 1873 and set in Cincinnati, Ohio. Beloved takes place after the end of the Civil War. And past is actually like a kind of burden that they try to forget. Okay. And the novelist tries to makes us aware that it is very difficult to actually expunge the past, to obliterate the past, because it continues to haunt. Okay, so this real life incident of Margaret Garner, okay, that that has been used as a kind of trope to pay tribute to that spirit of resilience that characterized the Afro-American culture. Okay, and the I will not go to the detailed discussion of the plot line of the story in today's class. Just some background information which is needed to understand the text, some overall ideas and historical context. And this novel is written with the technique of stream of consciousness technique. Okay, and in any novel where the stream of consciousness technique has been used, like the novels of Virginia Woolf, it is always difficult to sum up, okay, to actually narrate systematically that what happened. So it is at the same time a historical fiction and a sort of gothic fiction. Gothic trope or the supernatural trope have been used. And I was talking about the fugitive slave law, which was enacted in 1850. And this fugitive law made it a crime to harbor a fugitive slave in a free state. So it basically demanded or basically meant that slavery was the law of the land, okay, not just of the slave states. So the realistic picture of slavery that looms large, it is, as I told you, it is set in the Reconstruction era. Okay. And as I pointed out, the Raymond Williams's notion of the structure of feeling, okay, that this is an attempt to recuperate, to retrieve, to recapture the real structure of feeling that perhaps had been buried by the Eurocentric version. So the Eurocentric accounts of slavery has been dismissed, and the novel is given a very realistic portrait of slavery, where the novelist has tried to provide a counter canon, an alternative point of view of the Eurocentric notion of slavery, and the usage or the introduction of Sethe and the other characters as witness. It is also a sort of memory novel. Okay. So from their memory, they actually use such incident to the cruel and barbaric acts that obviously occasions from the slavery or from the system of slavery. Okay. And next, I would like to focus on the epigraphs of the novels, which obviously contain some additional layer of thought. One second. Yeah. So here you can see that this novel, Beloved, has got the two epigraphs. First is, I will call them my people, and which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved. So this is something that is used as a part of the epigraph, and the other one is 60 million and more. So both of these lines have got a significance. And the epigraph, the first one, I will call, actually the first one is 60 million and more, then I will call them my people is arranged. So the I will call them my people, these lines is actually taken from the Bible. It's a biblical line, and the verse refers to Apostle Paul's in kind of discussion of the inclusion of the non-Jews into the family of God. In that context, it is articulated whether the non-Jews can be assimilated into that family of God. So the central idea is that those who were once outsiders have now been insiders, have now been brought into the fold. And this theme of inclusion and acceptance that resonates deeply within the narrative of Beloved, particularly with its focus on the Afro-American experience of slavery and its aftermath. So this first epigraph can be interpreted in several ways. It could be seen as a reference to the African slaves who were not considered people by their white oppressors. Okay, and the phrase, her beloved, which was not beloved, may refer to also the central character, beloved, who represents the forgotten and unacknowledged victims of slavery. And secondly, this line can also be seen as a commentary on the process of self-acceptance and reconciliation that the main character, Sethe, undergoes in the novel. So Sethe, who was once not her own person due to the dehumanizing institution of slavery, learns to accept and love herself. So in a sense, the epigraph serves as a powerful lens through which to interpret the themes and narrative of Morrison's novel, and it also speaks to the experiences of marginalization, the struggle for identity acceptance, and the power of love and connection. And the other one, 60 million and more, this brief, succinct statement also sets the tone for the entire novel. Because the number 60 million and more is actually an allusion to the estimated number of African people who died during the transatlantic slave trade. So, and more part of the epigraph acknowledges that the exact number of Africans who died is unknown, and perhaps they're likely far higher than they kind of estimate. So, by starting the novel with this epigraph, 60 million and more, Morrison immediately brings the reader's attention to the brutality of the slave trade, and it serves as a stark reminder of the vast number of lives lost and the systematic dehumanization of a whole race of people. So the novel itself is a reflection and exploration of that tragic history as it delves into the life of Sethe, a former slave, and the haunting legacy of slavery. Okay, so as I told you that both of these epigraphs contain a significant clue to the entire narrative that unfolds later. And the opening sentence, as I have already discussed, the 124 was spiteful. Why is it portrayed or actually written? That has got a particular purpose of its own. And next, the last one where I shall stop for today, the first part of the synopsis of the first part of this novel. So here we find that Sethe and Denver have lived alone since Baby Sag's death almost 9 years earlier. One second. Right after Howard and Butler, Sethe's sons and Denver's older brothers had run away from the spirit that haunts the house within 2 months of each other. And the spirit is thought to be that of Sethe's daughter, born 2 years before Denver, who died. And Paul D., another former slave from Sweet Home, comes to Sethe's home. And as he enters, the spirit makes an appearance as a red light, and Paul D. thinks it is evil. But Sethe insists it is only sad and full of grief. And Sethe tells Paul D. how school teacher's nephews stole her breast milk of her whipping of the birth of Denver as she was fleeing from slavery and of Baby Sag's death. The spirit appears again to shake the floorboards of the house, but Paul D. sends it away, thereby leaving Denver lonely, and they decide that Paul D. will stay, and Denver's hostility towards him for sending away her only company notwithstanding. So this opening section of Beloved brings into the focus or brings into the forefront many of the central ideas of the entire narrative. And it is also a memory novel, as I told you, because it is through the filter of memory that we gradually come to know about the system of oppression through which they actually underwent. So the first opening kind of pages of the novel, they're full of important events and history. And it is clear right from the beginning that each character, be it Sethe, be it Paul D., they have suffered tremendously And that recapitulation of that terrible suffering is indeed a kind of horrible or traumatic experience. For example, that vivid memory of that the theft of her breast milk, okay, the vivid memory of her whipping. This is something that is depicted. Okay, and the loneliness of these characters is also suggested by the time the novel actually opens. Baby Sachs, okay, who is actually dead, and a spiritual leader of the community. Okay, so Baby Sachs is an important character. I shall discuss it later. And so, right from the beginning of this novel, we see that there are plenty of memories. Some memories are pleasant, some are actually harsh ones. And Sethe sometimes remembers her careful treatment by the male slaves at the sweet home. Okay. And joyfully recounts the story of her kind of budding dress to her surviving daughter, Denver, etc. But along with these happy memories, there are memories of exploitation that we shall find later on graphically described. And remember that the the plantation kind of house is actually ironically entitled Sweet Home. Okay, it is not a pleasant, happy type of abode, but it is just the opposite of it. Okay, so it is not at all a sweet home, but rather a kind of veritable inferno that one can think of. And gradually we come to the understanding of the different bouts of oppression that engulfed the different characters. We get to know about Sikso. Okay. And there is also the important function that the community actually played. There are some mysteries in this text as to the disappearance of the ghost or beloved. You never know that why actually beloved went away. Okay. So it is not possible to give a sort of one valid reason. This last portion I will discuss after having summed up the entire story. So Sethe, who is a independent girl, a woman full of resilience, a former slave, and her traumas include the violence, the abuse, or for example, the lack of any maternal presence in her childhood. And Sethe killed her daughter because she saw killing herself and her children as the only way to avoid being recaptured by the slave owner. So death is preferable to slavery or enslavement. But this violent action of death is motivated by love. This is the story of mother-daughter saga. So she was stopped before she could kill anyone else. Okay. And her life is determined by the trauma of what happened. And this ghost of the dead baby girl who comes back in the form of beloved as the other characters gradually come to believe that this girl has come back in the form of beloved when humming the same tune. Okay. So it may be the ghost, it may be the reincarnation, okay, whatever. There are some suggestions in this text. And it is the love, it is that boundless love of a mother that is so deep, okay, that actually occasions this act of cruelty. Okay. And Seth's own mother was not allowed to care for her, and members of the black families were sold and displaced with no consideration for the family unit. And Seth wishes to reclaim these crucial family kind of bonds. So it is a saga of that friendship, that camaraderie. But the real mystery resides with beloved. Who is the beloved here? Is she the embodiment of that dead daughter? So her name mirrors the only thing written on the little girl's tombstone. And her appearance after the ghost of the dead baby was chased away. Okay, that supports this type of interpretation of that character, that it is perhaps the returning back of that spirit. And before Sethe becomes convinced that she is her lost daughter, she believes that beloved has escaped from a life of imprisonment. Beloved has escaped from a life of abuse. And in the same way, the ghost of the baby can be seen as a metaphor for the family's connection with the memory of the murdered little girl. However, excessive rationalization of the fantastic elements that could actually lessen their emotional value. Okay, so in order to truly feel this kind of novel, you need to read it, because beloved can only be unlocked through a detailed engagement with the text, and can be can hardly be actually articulated in terms of its synopsis, plot structure, but some background issues that can be discussed. Okay, and there is also in the opening section of the novel the mention of Denver. Denver is Sethe's youngest child, the only one that is living with her, and her brothers, they have left the house because they are tormented by the ghost of their sister. So Denver was born during Sethe's escape from slavery, and she was helped into the world by Amy Denver, a poor white man who felt enough empathy towards Sethe to help her. And Denver is actually named after her. Okay. So at the beginning of this novel, she is 18 years old, but shy, childlike. Okay. Because she lives alone with Sethe without any contact with the wider community. And as a child, she went to school for little time, but she shut herself away from the world when she learned about the crime committed by her mother. And no doubt that Denver loves Sethe, but she also fears her, because she is afraid that if provoked, then Sethe can kill again. Sethe can do that same type of atrocity. And it is also, Denver is also a tragic character, no doubt. Denver is desperate for company, and she embraces the presence of the baby's ghost. And she was very upset when Paul D, who actually come to the house, who was a former slave along with Sethe, who actually who actually drove the ghost of the spirit baby girl actually away. Denver becomes very upset, because also that type of intimacy, the inwardness, that had developed during this time. And she is delighted when beloved enters their lives. She cares for beloved and loves her desperately, and she wants to protect beloved from Sethe until she realizes that it is Sethe who needs protection. So at this point, Denver grows up and takes responsibility of her family by seeking help from the Black community and finding work. So she takes her place in the community, which is a significant change for the woman who has lived in isolation all her life. And the other character whom we saw in the opening section is Paul D. Okay. And his past life as a slave is filled with traumatic incidents, traumatic events, the acts of violence. Paul D had witnessed the sufferings of those close to him. Mm, For example, watching Hill, who was the Seth's lost husband, losing his mind. So the extreme act of abuse that he himself had endured include having a kind of metal bead placed in his mouth and being part of a chain gang. So this is something that he had experienced. And as a result of that traumatic past, Paul D represses his feelings and does not dare to love too much. And even after he escaped slavery, made he has not made actually any home anywhere. Okay, and not until that he wants to build a new life with Seth. Okay, so this is something for today, and in the next class, I will be looking into this text in more detail and going into the plot structure. By this time, what you can do, you can read the text if you can. If not, you can at least flip through the synoptical analysis that is available in various sites here, and which will be kind of a kind of ready reckoner or quick help for you to tackle questions from this if you don't get the time. And this is a text that needed much time actually to emotionally connect with it. Okay, otherwise no one can tell the story at a kind of word go, and there are so many layers, so many flashbacks, so there is no teleological movement that actually operates here. Okay, many meandering kind of turn that this novel has got. But there are some other issues, one or two events that I would like to discuss in the next class. Even the role of the community, the ending scene, okay, and the structure of the beloved, etc. So that's for the next class. And also pay attention to Morrison's other works which she had written. Okay, not only the canonical works which are part of the university curriculum, but some shorter plays, some fictions, shorter fictions, some plays, uh, some non-fiction works, like it says, document their names. So you can also expect, for example, the short questions and what such broad kind of terms that we bring into play while analyzing Morrison's Beloved. They include the theme of slavery, the theme of Gothic fiction, the theme of mother-daughter relationship, the notion of community as a neo-slave documentation or narrative, basically this type of thing. Magic realism, this is also a kind of interesting kind of topic from this text. Magic realism, remember, and the narrative technique, they are the same thing, same topic. Okay. So today I have a meeting from 8 p.m. So I will stop here.